Coalesce supports the use of Snowflake Dynamic tables as nodes within your data pipeline. These nodes can be added into your workspace the same way as any other node and are configured with a node definition and create template. To add a dynamic table node to your pipeline, select a node you want the dynamic table node to reference and add the node. The dynamic table node will open and we can see all of the columns within the node. Next, we can navigate to the configuration settings on the right-hand side of the screen. Within the Dynamic Table Options dropdown, the first item we'll see is the warehouse on which we want the dynamic table to execute. You can list any valid virtual warehouse that has been created within your Snowflake account here. It is important to note that in order for the specified warehouse to be used, you'll need to configure the warehouse target parameter within your workspace settings. This can be done by navigating to the workspace settings and selecting Parameters. By using the configuration block shown here, you can pass through a value to the target dynamic table warehouse parameter. The default value is dev environment, which, when used, will default to the value provided back in the configuration settings of the dynamic table. Alternatively, you can pass through an existing virtual warehouse in your Snowflake account, which will override any value you provide within the specified warehouse listed in the dynamic table node. Regardless of the value you choose to use for this parameter, you will need to include the parameter within your workspace in order to properly run dynamic table nodes. From here, back in our dynamic table options in our node, we have the option to toggle downstream, on or off. By leaving the toggle off, users can determine the lag specification for the dynamic table, which contains the value and time period of how often the dynamic table will refresh. If the toggle is turned on, the dynamic table will automatically refresh when downstream dependent dynamic tables are also refreshed. The refresh mode specifies the type of refresh for the dynamic table. When set to auto, an incremental refresh is enforced by default. When set to incremental, the refresh evaluates changes since the last refresh and merges them into the table. When set to full, the configuration will run a full refresh which replaces all of the previous records with the results from the dynamic table run. The initialize option specifies the behavior of the initial refresh of the dynamic table. When set to onCreate, the dynamic table will be refreshed synchronously at creation. When set to onSchedule, the dynamic table will be refreshed at the next scheduled refresh. Once the dynamic table options have been configured, you have the ability to configure the general options of the node. The first option is a distinct toggle, which specifies whether the dynamic table will return distinct rows or not. The group by toggle specifies whether or not to add non-aggregated columns to a group by statement. Finally, the multi-source toggle specifies whether multiple sources will be combined using a union or union all. You'll note that there is only a create button from the Coalesce interface, as dynamic tables will refresh based on the lag specification provided rather than running on demand. You can transform, apply filters, and preview the data of your dynamic table just like you would any other node within Coalesce. Additionally, there is no limit to the number of dynamic tables you can use within your pipeline, giving you complete control over how each dynamic table is created and refreshed. For more information on dynamic table nodes in Coalesce, you can view our documentation or reach out to us at help.coalesce.io.